In addition to wearing many, many other pretty hats, Jennifer Ann Gordon is a multi-award winning dark fiction horror author. Pretty Ugly, our featured book today, won the Helicon Award for Best Horror 2022. Stay tuned for today's episode of the Writer's Corner live show. Don't go away, we'll be right back. If you're just joining us, welcome to the Writer's Corner live show. I'm your host, Brigitte Limbanda from Cape Town in South Africa, and in today's show, we're going to be welcome an amazing author, Jennifer Ann Gordon. If this is your first time watching the show, we've been going live for over 4.5 years. We'd love to give you a shout out, so just let us know in the comments. This live stream is brought to you compliments of Creative Edge, StreamYard, and Be Life Media. So whether you're watching us over on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, on LinkedIn, Amazon Live, a hearty warm welcome. And if you're catching the replay, a hearty warm welcome to you too. Now, one of the things that we're very, very passionate about is helping authors level up. Thanks to the pandemic, you're no longer limited to going down to the library or your local school to talk about your book. You can now hop online and talk about your book, not just to people where you live locally, but globally. Isn't that just amazing? It's just opened up wonderful doors for authors. But we like to share one or two quick tips before we bring our amazing author on the show to join us here. So many of you may talk about your book when you hop onto TikTok or Instagram, and when you do that, you'll be holding your phone in portrait mode, and that be 100% correct because it will use the entire screen real estate when you're on TikTok and when you're on Instagram. But here's a tip: if you are going live on Facebook, on YouTube, or any of the other platforms, you want to turn your phone the other way around, and that's called landscape mode. And if you ever wondered why you're going live on Facebook and you get those black lines on the sides, well, that's why, and that'll fix it. What you also want to do is ensure that you put your phone onto a tripod. Now, it doesn't really matter. I mean, there are like a gazillion different tripods. You can literally take your pick. But do put your phone on a tripod because it's impossible for you to talk about your book, be animated, pay attention to your audience, and hold your phone still. That's impossible. But if you're traveling and you're talking about your book, here's a quick hack. Take your phone, take some sticky tape, press stick, tic tac, whatever it is, and just stick your phone onto the nearest window. The great thing about that is that you're going to have your phone at the correct 90-degree angle. Plus, you're going to have front-facing light, so your audience can see you while you're talking about your book, because that's exactly what you want. Now, if you want to level up just a little bit from there, you can invest in any kind of lavalier microphone, and I can tell you there are a gazillion of them. Just take your pick. There are different brands, different makes, but these lavalier microphones, they're not expensive, they're very cheap, but they'll make a huge difference. If however you are on your on a laptop or a computer and you want to level up there, invest in a webcam. Anything in the Logitech range, I've tried all of them as I've grown up with Logitech, and Mary and I are both using Brio, which has got right side light technology, which means you don't have to be a lighting fundi. It'll just automatically adjust to your lighting conditions, and that's wonderful. And now let me welcome my amazing co-host and friend, Mary Elizabeth Jackson. And after that, we're going to welcome Jennifer Ann Gordon. Mary is a special needs and disabilities advocate. She's a educational speaker, a pastor, ghostwriter, and an award-winning author herself. And go check out her latest book, Cheers from Heaven. Mary, how are you today?
I am great. And as you can see by the clothing we have on, right? We're going into winter and you're going into summer because we have our first cold snap. It is freezing.
Oh my goodness, isn't it just crazy how we live in different parts of the world? And it's one of the things that we've both loved about it. We've been doing this show together for 4.5 years and we've never met in person. How awesome is that? But we're great
I
friends. I
know.
mean, it's
I know.
crazy.
It's absolutely amazing. We know everything about each other and all about our kids. And, it's just, I know it's like having kind of long distance family. It's been great. And we love our show and all the authors. And we love who we have on today, don't we?
We absolutely do. Now, guys, if you have never, ever, ever, ever met Jennifer Ann Gordon, she wears like a ton of amazing, beautiful hats. She's a multi award winning dark fiction horror author, in addition to everything else that she does. And her book, Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent, won the Kindle Award for Best Horror Suspense for 2020. And the featured book, the one we're going to be talking about a bit more today, which is Pretty Ugly, and I'm interested about where that title came from. It won the Helicon Award for Best Horror 2022. Also, her other work is Daylight from Madness, which is the hotel book series, received the gold seal from the Book View and also the platinum seal from Reader's Favorite. So, without any further ado, let's give a hearty warm welcome to our amazing guest, Jennifer Ann Gordon.
Hi.
Hello.
Jennifer, welcome, welcome. So glad to
Well,
have you on our show.
it's
Yes.
good to be here. I will say, so it's morning where I am. It was a freezing morning where I am,
Mhm.
much like Mary Elizabeth. So I thought, I'm all bundled up in my sweater. I'm hoping my ring light is going to keep me a little bit warm because I didn't
I
want to turn on
know.
the space heater and have it make like this weird clanking noise during the interview.
Yeah, but you write horror, so it would have been perfect because we could
Yeah,
have
I
then
could
come
have
up
just
with
said, it's a ghost.
yeah,
It's just a
right, a whole
ghost.
ghost story, right?
I mean, I do live in a haunted house, so it would have been fine.
Oh, that is so amazing. And like, well, okay, I know we have questions for you, but if we have time, we have to ask you about the ghost. Okay, let's dive
We
right in
we
because
absolutely do. Oh
yeah,
my goodness! I wanted just give a
We'll
huge
make
big shout
time.
out to Erin and also to Alison who's joined us there. Great to have you in the comments and welcome. Now, Jennifer, you are a woman of a ton of different hats and many creative talents. Which is of all your creative talents? Which is your favorite, and how did you segue into becoming a writer?
Um, I mean, I think writing actually is my favorite out of all of them. For people who don't know me, I went to school for theater and I worked in professional regional theater for many years. I worked as a painter. I'm a multimedia, mixed media artist. My day job for the past 13 years has been a professional ballroom dance instructor. So basically what I'm saying is I cannot do math and I was really bad at science. So I only can do things that are creative. Uh, but I think I've been writing since I was a kid and it was my first love. And I think writing actually encompasses everything that I love. I feel like as a writer, I'm acting out every amazing part of every amazing movie or play I could ever want to be in. I'm creating characters the same way I would on a stage. I'm painting pictures, this time with words. And if I want to break out into dance or have one of my characters break out into dance in the book, I can do that too.
oh, I love it. I love it. And I was just discussing this morning, Jennifer, about how brilliant the creative art mind is, right? But you have people who are so creative that way, but they can't take an ACT or pass it. They can't do well in math.
Yeah.
But if you give them a test on the creative side, they're going to be way off the charts, you know?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm way back in the day when I took my SATs. I took them multiple times because my math score was abysmal. every time, and my English side was off the charts. And I'm like, oh no. Like, what do you do? Like, what college do you go to? So
The creative
my
art college is where
yeah,
you go.
I went to a fine arts college. We
There
didn't
you
even
go.
have math, not even an option.
Yeah, there you go. Well, we want to know, did you consciously choose to become a horror writer? We always love to hear this story because we have interviewed lots of horror writers. So was this like your whole life, or, did something just happen and attract you to it?
Yeah, something traumatic as a child. No, I have always loved horror. I've always been drawn to it since I was a little kid, and I walked in on my mother watching the movie Poltergeist.
Oh,
And, I was it was on HBO or something, and I think I might have been 3 or 4, and I couldn't sleep, so I wandered downstairs, and there's my mother watching this, really scary movie. And instead of putting me directly to bed, she let me stay up for a little while. And like in the movie Poltergeist, there's a little girl in it, and terrible things happen to her. And I was petrified because I felt like I was that little girl. And like that was kind of my first experience of liking the experience of being scared, if that makes sense. I also read a Stephen King novel, Pet Sematary, at a very early age, at the age of 10. It was the cover with the cat on it. My uncle was living with us at the time. It was his copy of the book. I thought it was a book about a cat, so I snatched it. And like I knew I shouldn't have it, but I still thought it's a book about a cat. It can't be that bad. And I remember reading it in little chunks in my bedroom, hiding behind my dollhouse, and just knowing full well if my parents caught me with it, I would be in so much trouble. And yeah, since then, horror has been my go-to comfort, my comfort book, if that makes any sense. Like there's nothing more comforting to me than being petrified, reading about ghosts or a haunted house. I do write other things besides horror, but primarily what I am known for at this time in my career is a horror novelist. But there's more to come.
Yeah, we got to say hi to our buddy Terry Shepard.
Hey, Terry.
Hey, Terry. And where do you draw your inspiration from? So now we understand where where the horror bit comes from, but your stories are mesmerizing. So where do you draw that inspiration from?
I always say that I write like sometimes this phrase is like poo-pooed upon where I say like, oh, I write literary horror or I write grief horror or trauma horror. So I always take, for example, in Pretty Ugly, I took the concept of childhood grief and what happens if you lose somebody very important to you during childhood. What does that turn you into? Do you become somebody who cannot accept love or be loved? And then if you are that person, what happens when, and in the case of Pretty Ugly, what happens when the world ends or is coming to an end? Who are you during those moments? So I try to write horror from a very real place, more psychological horror than, I don't tend to write about monsters. I'm not saying I never will, but I don't tend to write about vampires or werewolves or Lovecraftian creatures. I love that. It's not my forte, but I like using horror as a metaphor for a lot of times grief or trauma, because what better thing than a ghost to represent something that you may have lost?
Oh, that's really very brilliant. And children are very fascinated by that. Where does a person go when they die? And then a lot of times kids are tuned into like grandpa or grandma, like grandpa's here right now, mom. I've had those
Yes.
conversations. So brilliant on you for coming from that angle, to help us be in touch with all that. Okay, so we want to ask you about your title, Pretty Ugly, and like the way you chose to do it, because you don't always see titles like that. You just see, maybe you see a hyphen there instead of the way that it is. So what made you think about doing it that way?
So, my very first kind kind of inspiration for Pretty Ugly came pre-pandemic. So this was in a time before we got very used to seeing people in face masks. And I thought about the world, and I thought about our online world and how obsessed people are with image. So I thought of these two characters, a failed politician and an Instagram influencer, and why they are the way they are, where their entire life is based on their facade. It's not who they are inside, but it's who they are on the outside is what gives them fulfillment. And then I thought, what if something happened in the world where everybody's faces, I don't want to say started rotting off their body, but what would happen if there was a virus that really attacked you very physically in your face, like predominantly? It could kill you, or it could leave you physically scarred to the point of you would have to wear a mask. So I thought of this dichotomy of the facade, the pretty, and the physical ugly. But then it's also a play on words, because these people are not the most likable when you first meet them. But through, living through the end of the world and through kind of discovering why they are the way they are, their real beauty finally starts to shine through. So, started as a play on words.
And your characters, Jennifer, are they all purely fictional? And I'm asking this because a lot of authors will say some, yes, they're 100% fictional, but most of the times we find that authors will say they've drawn on people they know in real life, and they sort of exaggerate their character a little bit. So how do you put your characters together? Where do you draw your inspiration for the characters from?
This is probably going to make me sound either incredibly narcissistic or incredibly neurotic, maybe both. I feel like all of my characters are my worst qualities rolled into a different kind of package. So, and some of my best qualities, because my characters they might not be likable, but I think at the end of every book you do love them. So yeah, a lot of the character is me. Like my male lead in Pretty Ugly, his name is Sam. His nickname is Sam the Eagle. And I called him that for a number of reasons in the book. But the inspiration for that was when I was very, very little, I had a crush on the Sam the Eagle Muppet. And I didn't even realize, like, it was a Muppet and a bird. And I remember my father just telling me I should not have a crush on this puppet, not because it was a puppet, but he later on told me it was because that puppet it symbolized being a Republican. And and my dad was like, that's the wrong choice. When really he should have been like, okay, you're 3, you have a crush on a bird. Hopefully you'll grow out of it.
Right. It's interesting how our parents freak out when we're little over something.
I know, over something that, like, obviously at the age of 3, I had no idea I didn't even really know what having a crush meant, but I knew that I really liked Sam the Eagle's strong nose line. And frankly, I still like a good strong nose line in a person.
There you go. It makes it makes for good character drawing. And, it always was a symbol of stamina and strength and personality and all kinds of stuff, for a long time, and in society for a very long time. Do you have a copy of your book with you?
I don't. I am. So, we're going to talk about my house maybe if we get a chance. My husband's office is up where all of my books are. And so I am like sequestered in like our bottom bedroom, and I didn't even think to grab one of my books.
No, it's okay. Let's talk about your house. Let's talk about the ghost then.
So, for people who follow me on Instagram or Facebook, a little over a year ago, I moved to very rural New Hampshire to a strange looking Gothic house in the middle of the woods. When people see it, usually they think it is an old church. It's not. it was designed by a woman named Esther. She was a poet and an artist herself. And she bought this land and lived in a little cottage on the property, and, and designed this house that I now live in with my husband. And the house doesn't really make sense because she wasn't an architect. She had no house design skills. But she had this house built that had everything she needed, which was a tower overlooking all of the property, where that was her writing space and her office. And so it's a really wonderful space to live in. The walls are made of bookshelves. It's really cool. But our second, third, and fourth floor are all kind of open concept. So where I write in the fourth floor tower, it's also it overlooks my husband's office. So he's working now near all my books. But so I'm in our bedroom.
That sounds amazing.
On like the garden level floor.
Metal.
Yeah. So Esther is still here. Esther, our lovely, friendly ghost. We can hear her sometimes. She is benevolent and amazing. Mainly, I hear her pacing up in the little writing tower, and I just really understand what she's going through. So I'm always
you can channel her. You can channel her while you're writing. Yeah,
exactly. I'm always just like, I pace up there too.
Jennifer, I do want to ask you about the covers of your book. Like your books, the covers of all your books are very, very striking. Do you use the same artist, and how much creative input do you have in your covers?
So my very first novel, Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent, the photograph on the cover of that book is a woman in a kind of shredded wedding gown. You can't see her face. That photo is a photo of me. That was taken by my husband. We were performing in a haunted attraction, and we did a couple, photo shoots on that property in a fake cemetery. So that actually, I never intended that to be my book cover for Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent. I started using it as like a teaser image, and then people were really responding to it and saying, I love your book cover. And I kept thinking, that's not my book cover, that's me. So I photoshopped my tattoos out and ended up using that photo as the cover for Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent. For my 2 short novel series, the Hotel series, which includes From Daylight to Madness and When the Sleeping Dead Still Talk, I had a lot of creative control in those. I sent kind of core images and had long discussions with one of the most amazing cover designers out there. His name is Don Noble. He works for Rooster Republic Press. It's a company that he owns. He does a lot of horror-related covers. So he designed those 2, and I couldn't love them more. Pretty Ugly has had 2 covers already in its short 1-year life, and they were both designed by the team at Books and Moods. And again, I had a lot of creative control. I picked out the core imagery and let them do their magic for both.
It's like a marriage, a perfect marriage, when you can find that somebody can work. You can work with somebody who can see your creative, boiling up in your mind, and
it's
magical.
It's magical to say words to somebody and just say something like, oh, I like want it to be a Victorian era woman, but also a teacup, and also blah, and look like a tarot card. And then, and that's how Don Noble made the magic that is From Daylight to Madness. That cover, like, I got it and I burst into tears. I was just like, oh, it's perfect.
It's amazing. I always love this part when we ask authors, how that sort of creative part of the cover came about, and just how the artist can sort of just somehow get into your head and translate what you envision inside your head onto your cover.
It's really spectacular. And and Don Noble is a genius, and he's so good at making horror covers, and he understands the horror community. And then the people at Books and Moods, they handled the interior design of Pretty Ugly as well, for the paperback. and they were in charge of the early arcs being sent out. And so they really had their finger like inside this book. They knew this book almost as well as I knew the book. So when it came time for the cover to come out, it was easy.
That is awesome. So what would you tell your younger self?
I would tell her to not stop writing, even when you don't believe in yourself, and that there is, no such thing as good or bad during the whole writing process. There's just writing, and you can always take something that's bad and make it something better. I think early on I got very discouraged, especially in my process of writing Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent. I always say that book took 20 years and 2 months of actual writing. But the 20 years that I kept telling myself I couldn't write it were, 20 years. I don't want to say wasted, because obviously the life I lived enhanced the book. But I would have loved to believed in myself earlier.
Yes, very true words for all of us, right?
Yes.
Absolutely. And are all your books traditionally published, self-published? What's your thoughts for an author out there that's an aspiring author? What's your words of wisdom as to, going traditionally publishing or self-published?
So I love books being out there, and I love books in general. So that being said, I am kind of all over the place. My first book, Beautiful, Frightening, and Silent, was traditionally published with a small press. Since then, that small press has gone, the way of the unicorn is gone. It no longer exists. So now that book is self-published. The Hotel series and Pretty Ugly are self-published. And Pretty Ugly, I was going to query, but by the time I was done, the pandemic was happening, and this was a book that involved sickness and the words pandemic. And I didn't want to, I was like, I just have to put it out now, because by the time it's traditionally published, it'll be 3 years from now. And either it won't feel as intensely personal and important, or people will just say, I don't want to read about anything with somebody in a mask. So Pretty Ugly came out for that reason. That being said, I do have a literary agent. The last year and a half of my life, I've spent working on a book that I had pitched to her. That book is currently out on submission to publishers right now, very recently. So this happened at the end of last week, beginning of this week. So it's exciting and nerve-wracking, and hopefully I'll have some kind of announcement soon about that, but you never know, because traditional publishing happens at such a different pace than small publishing, and certainly self-publishing. So I know a lot of people who have been saying, oh, you haven't put out a book in a year and a half. Did you stop writing? And I'm like, no, it's just, I'm on a different timeline, and I think all of them are valid. But I will say, in my heart of hearts, I have always wanted a traditional book deal since I was little. I wanted to be able to go to New York City and have lunch with my editor. And, I've wanted all of that. So I have nothing against self-publishing. I intend to probably still continue to self-publish in the future, certain projects. But I'm reaching for that brass ring and going for hopefully traditionally published sometime in the next couple years, because again, it takes a long time.
Yeah,
The
it
submission
does.
process itself can take a year.
Yeah. Well, they have up to 18 months, and it just depends on the size of the house,
Yes.
what they get done. But we are so happy that you joined us today and got to share all this stuff. And we're saying we're sending you prayers and good wishes that dream of yours will come true, and you'll have to let us know if it does.
I definitely will. It's always, exciting. I'm very excited to see when my friends get their book deals and they finally get to make those big fancy announcements of like those publisher marketplace announcements. So, that's the dream. Hopefully it'll happen. So stay tuned. But That being said, I'm already hard at work on another novel. So
I'm sh- I'm sure it will happen for you, Jennifer, and we'd love to have you back. As
I
soon
would
as you've got the
love to be
date for your
back.
next book, do let us know so we can get you booked. So thank you so much for stopping by on our show today. We really
Thank
enjoyed the
you
time with
both.
you. The time flies when you have fun. So thank you so much for staying with us, and to our amazing audience. Huge shout out to every one of you for joining us on the show as well today. And we'll see you back next week on another episode of the Writers Corner live show. Stay well, everyone, and goodbye for now.
Thank you.